You've covered some of the greatest sporting personalities, and as I listed, my audience will understand that how blessed we are to have you here today. You've had the pleasure of having Mike Tyson.
Yes.
Tell us about your experience of meeting Mike
Just fantastic.
Tyson.
I mean, believe me, it is the most thrilled I have been. He was crazy, in an interesting way. I asked him, like, when he first got his first big paycheck after he became a star, what did he do with it? So he just said, I don't know, man, I bought a lot of stuff, a lot of cars, Rolls Royces and mansions and stuff like that. So great experience. Just I got my interview as a trainee of the biggest celebrity in the country at that time, Sachin Tendulkar, for the first time. This is the mid-90s. He's at the peak of his popularity. And I was just starting out. I was a trainee. Sometimes you have a hunch, And I thought, let me just see, let me try. I went up to Wankhede Stadium. I called his room. He heard me out. I just introduced myself and I said, I'm from Asian Age. Asian Age was a new paper at that time. So I called his room from the reception and he very readily agreed. He said, yeah, okay, come tomorrow to Western Railway ground. And he even told me, it's in Mahalakshmi. He was always very decent to deal with. Always very polite, and he answered most of my questions.
So for the sports journalist, knowledge about the sport is still critical.
Of course. Domain knowledge, whatever journalist you are, whether it's politics, whether it's cinema, whether it is sports, domain knowledge comes first. You have to know the game. You have to know the structure also now. You have to know
the business side of sports.
The business side of sports has become very important. Say if it's a cricket info, where the emphasis is still on pure cricket writing. The pillars remain the same. Understanding of the game, respect for the game, respect for the facts, and how the game has unfolded. And then there are, of course, clickbait type organizations where the focus probably is on just grabbing more eyeballs. So it depends on what kind of place you're working for and what your brief is as a journalist.
What's your take on the present handshake fiasco?
Hot topic. I'll pass.
You'll pass?
Yeah. Okay, personally,
Well, there's a theory, whether God made it or nature made it, that's on your belief. But there's a theory which says that basically we've been given 2 eyes, 2 ears, 1 mouth, because reading or hearing is twice as difficult as talking. I add to it, we've been given 5 fingers because to write, you basically need probably 3. Somebody challenged like me when I started off, I needed almost all the 5. The challenge still remains, but I can write with 3 now. But, that also tells you my guest today, one of the finest writers. If you've followed sport for a long time, you will know who he is when I mention his name. But he's got the easier job today because he's got to do the talking, which is far easier than writing. But he wrote with a lot of panache and no pun intended, and he edited also ET Panache. He's also been a senior journalist with leading media organizations in India. And without further ado, let me just introduce him, Akshay Sawai. Thank you so much for doing this. This is a fanboy moment. I think I'm going to have fun with this.
Thank you for inviting me to your show.
Thank you so much. Akshay, we've all known you. People who used to use would use or would refer to the written word in sports journalism. We've read a lot about you. You've covered so many personalities. You've done features. That whole. How did the whole process start? So, are you a Bombay boy to start off with? I just wanted to know about.
Yeah. Born and brought up in Bombay.
Yeah.
And I played a fair amount of sports myself as a kid, especially tennis and badminton. So I played that competitively. And of course, it was also the great era of sports magazines, So I always feel that was, so I grew up in the 80s and a little bit in the 90s. So that I always feel, that was at that time, the balance was just right. The amount of sport that was there in the media, whether through magazines or television, was just right. It wasn't an overdose, and it wasn't too little. So yeah, so I was completely sports obsessed, and of course then we would play downstairs in the colony, and so sports was my biggest passion. I and my father also was a big sports enthusiast. He used to play football and hockey himself, so he had subscribed to Sports Week magazine. And at that time, there were three big magazines in India: Sports Week, Sports World, and Sports Star. So those were the influences on me, and so it was a nice time to be a kid,
And I take you back to something you wrote recently on the LinkedIn article, and how contemporary this is. Also comes from the fact that Sundar Pichai you wrote
Yes,
about. Yeah, he
yes.
was there. If people have watched the T20 World Cup, Google through Gemini is one of the major sponsors, and he was talking to Ravi Shastri,
Yes.
and you did re-mention it as to how he didn't talk too much about artificial intelligence, Gemini or Google, but he spoke about his growing up years in Chennai, Sports Star, posters, and Sunil Gavaskar, right? So certain things remain timeless, and certain things
They're timeless, and it
yeah.
tells you how an entire generation came up
Yes.
on those same influences, So there's Sundar Pichai, who today, lives in a completely rarefied bubble. He's CEO of one of the biggest companies in the world. But at the same time, there's this commonality that everybody from that generation shares, which is, reading sports magazines and putting up those posters on their walls. So yeah, that's quite that is very striking, and that is very it's very tells you something about that generation,
Yeah.
because everybody watched Doordarshan, everybody read those
Yeah,
sports
yeah.
magazines, everybody read newspapers, some comics also to bring in some pop culture. And the sports became a part of the comic scene also, because there used to be a comic on Sunil Gavaskar. He actually he's depicted as a superhero of some sort, and he's a crime fighter and all that.
Yeah, yeah,
So his
yeah.
popularity was leveraged even in comics. So yeah, that's where, and then so when it when it was time to choose a career, I thought this is something I could do. I was actually a commerce graduate, but I had zero interest in commerce.
Yeah.
I realized midway through my college, and I thought I should. And the sports industry seemed like a natural extension in terms of my career choice.
So was it journalism first or sports first, or when did you marry the two? Like
My childhood dream was to become a Wimbledon champion.
yes.
But didn't happen, of course. But then I was reading a lot also, and so then I thought of journalism because it seemed like a nice way to earn a living, because you could travel, you could interact with athletes, and you could write about it. So that appealed to me, and yeah, and that's how it happened.
So, but were you sure that it'll be sports journalism, or did you explore other areas also?
I did not. Probably I thought of advertising for a while,
Yeah.
because most people at that time who wanted to be journalists also were wanted to try advertising, because again it was you could there was a lot of sports in advertising also at that time.
Yeah.
And advertising was also cool, and it was fun. We all watched all the ads. We still remember those ads. So probably I considered advertising for a while, but for the most part it was sports journalism, because I was pretty confident I could do it quite well.
How has sports journalism changed over the years? Since you started
Yeah,
till
yeah.
contemporary sports journalism. How do you?
Now so of course when I started, the main medium was print, and then television started coming in. Then television became big. Then then there were the websites, the .com boom, and but now of course that has changed, and now the digital medium has become the more prominent medium in some ways, in terms of reach, in terms of immediacy, But I was just talking to someone in the print medium the other day, and it's just that in terms of stickiness, print still somehow endures.
Also, the credibility factor, does that?
No, credibility is there. There are
Yeah.
lot of credible people with credibility who are entirely on the digital medium.
Yeah.
Who are even operating as solo operators, as independent journalists.
Yeah.
But it's just from a reader's point of view, and actually even from an advertiser's point of view, I think print somewhere it retains its place. And I also see people sort of becoming aware that they need to spend a little time away from the screen, and somewhere, or maybe I'm just being hopeful, and maybe I'm just hoping for this to happen, that print survives in that way. But for the moment, I still feel print has its place. But yeah, it's changed in many ways. Your handheld devices, so many people consume. I don't remember, many of us watch entire matches on our phone now.
Yeah, that has changed.
That has completely changed. And talking about journalism, even that has just many more mediums. But I don't know if the basics have changed. I think the basics remain the same. Of course, it depends on what kind of media outlet you're working for.
Yeah.
If it's something that, if it's a Cricinfo, where the emphasis is still on pure cricket writing, right? So in that case, the basics remain the same. You have to have a command over. You have to understand the game. You have to. The pillars remain the same: understanding of the game, respect for the game, respect for the facts, and how the game has unfolded. And then there are, of course, clickbait type organizations where the focus probably is on just grabbing more eyeballs. So it depends on what kind of place you're working for and what your brief is as a journalist.
Yeah.
But somewhere I feel the basics remain the same. You have to understand the game. You have to have an interest in the game. You have to be good at communicating your thoughts across, and you have to be quick. So that's what I feel.
So we also address, we address three kind of segments when we started the Inner Athlete. Basically, we talk to entrepreneurs in sports. So we try and give them some ideas or something where they can get into, some ancillary business also around sport. Everything is not just the IPL, right? There are a lot of ancillary businesses around sports, around the sports sector as such.
Yeah.
We also address sports management students who are getting into, and then also the recreational athlete, like which you and I have been. You played racket sports, I played soccer, but and then you played at school, college level, and then basically. So, but now there is this new advent that is coming in, right? Almost people, the fitness culture is coming back, but they don't want to go to gyms. They want to play sport, and then there are recreational sports in this. Sports like pickleball, which has come, which is very, very recreational friendly, as say tennis, and I'll talk to you about it a little later. But I'm sure there will be some sports journalists also who are, hearing this conversation, right? So I wanted to know. A large part of sports journalism is also about covering personalities, covering big personalities, right?
Yeah.
They form a big part of the content.
Yeah.
In today's social media time, how has that changed? To say when you were, because I'm just seeing the way, this particular T20 World Cup, as I was talking to you offline, we were trying to do some content around it. And I read one of your articles where Sunil Gavaskar would also use the pen and used to write his own articles, and you were somebody who used to write, and that was something common between.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of collabs happening between our cricketers, present day cricketers, with what they call the influencers into absolutely something which is I don't want to personally, I find it pretty atrocious, the content that is coming out. But I think it's changing with time. But what I wanted to know was how are you going to cover sports personalities? Means the challenges for a budding sports
Yeah.
journalist.
See, the big challenge is that, again, now I have not been on the beat
Yeah.
for a while, like on the road for a while now. But from what I see, what I hear, the big challenge now is that the access to personalities is very controlled. You don't, they do a press conference at the most after a match. And before and after a match and after a tournament, and that's about it. The whole culture of one-on-one interviews have become very rare now. So if unless you know that player really well, then maybe he'll give you an interview. That too when he's not in the middle of a tournament, he or she is not in the middle of a tournament, and or then say maybe the IPL is coming up, and then it's every franchise then has a marketing and media outreach, and then through that they arrange some interviews for one-on-one interviews. So I feel the access
But it's
has
not
gone down.
organic, right? It's not organic like the old times when you'd approach a player, not with where there is no objective from the player's side to basically.
Yeah. No, again, I would say it depends on who is doing that interview. You still see some pretty in-depth, in hardcore sports interviews in certain publications or on certain websites. You see someone like Ashwin. Okay, so if an Ashwin, I know that that journalists won't have the access or authority that an Ashwin has, but if an Ashwin is inviting someone on his podcast or on his show, it is going to be insightful. So I guess a lot depends on who is doing that interview and what the nature.
But what I
of the
meant to say was
conversation is.
it's become a little bit vanilla, right? It's taken away that the flavor of
it has.
because it is very controlled in terms of the sports personality is very controlled.
It's very controlled. It's very guarded. Everyone is now very wary of being trolled, of saying something even remotely controversial. So yeah, definitely it's become just a little too controlled, and that access is gone. Some of that charm has gone, I would say, in the job. Like, we could, in our time, we could just walk up to. I'll give you an example of how I interviewed Sachin Tendulkar for the first time. Now, he's Sachin Tendulkar. Okay, this is the mid-90s. He's at the peak of his popularity. Okay.
Already probably captained India once.
No, he hadn't become captain.
No, not yet.
But he was the superstar.
Yes.
And obviously, and I was just starting out. I was a trainee. And I just thought that maybe, let's see, sometimes you have a hunch, And I thought, let me just see, let me try. And he was staying at those days he was playing a Ranji Trophy game, preparing for a Ranji Trophy game, and then he was staying at Wankhede Garware clubhouse. That's where the team was. So I went up to Wankhede Stadium. I called his room. He heard me out. I just introduced myself and I said, I'm from Asian Age. Asian Age was a new paper at that time, and it was positioned as India's first satellite / global newspaper kind of thing. It had a slightly international positioning, because it used to be brought out also from the UK. So I called his room from the reception, and he very readily agreed. He said, yeah, okay, come tomorrow to Western Railway ground. And he even told me, it's in Mahalakshmi. So, and that was that. And today I went at the appointed hour. I was there well before time, and I made a rookie mistake. I went with a long list of questions, 25 odd questions. And that's a lot, especially, and he was playing a match. if it was not Ranji Trophy, it was some local match, but an important one, and he always took his cricket very seriously. So even if it's a relatively smaller match, that morning to ask him 25 questions does not always happen. But he was, he was very, always very decent to deal with, always very polite, and he answered most of my questions. And I got my interview as a trainee of the biggest celebrity in the country at that time, probably.
Yes.
Today, I don't see. I don't think a trainee can simply ask a Sanju Samson or Surya Kumar Yadav for an interview. He won't be able to get anywhere close to him.
Yeah.
Similar, then there used to also be a lot of freedom from bosses. At least in my case, I was lucky enough to work with some great bosses like Ayaz Memon.
Yeah.
So I was at Midday. That's where, I joined Asian Age as a trainee. Then I went to Midday. That was really my foundation. And then the match fixing scandal had broken. Okay. And it was a huge story. Just imagine, it's the biggest sport in the country. Okay. And suddenly you find out that matches are perhaps fixed. And of course, there was a big Pakistan connection to it. And it was something, I thought, I'm curious what Imran Khan has to say about this, Wow. There was one more specific context. I think Wasim Akram had stepped down as captain and whatever.
It was a tumultuous time for Pakistan cricket also, right?
Yeah.
The captaincy was changing. You're talking about the mid-90s probably.
Mid-90s, yes, 97.
Yeah.
And I somehow then got hold of a number of a contact for Imran, I think one of his managers. Then I got the hospital number, Shaukat Khanum Memorial Hospital number. Then I got a number for Imran's residence. And so I dialed, and an elderly sounding person answered the phone, hello, and all that. And I think probably it was his father. I don't know, it could be. And so Imran was probably somewhere else in the house, and he shouted on the phone, he called him, "Oi, Imran," in a Punjabi thing. And then Imran came on the line. It's like Imran Khan is a huge personality, and I think he was probably napping or something where he sounded like that. He sounded like, I had written this, he sounded like a lion who had been woken up from his siesta. Hello, and whatever. Yeah, okay, and whatever, and and then, but he spoke again, and if just 3-4 questions, and that's enough sometimes.
You remember his response though?
Yeah, he said, I'm sure it happens. He was not in denial about it. He was not in denial about it. I think in that sense, he was a very upright sort of person, who was...
but it must have been an interesting time. Sorry to intervene.
Yeah.
From sports journalism, it was almost period of investigative journalism, right?
Yeah. Although I was not much of an investigative journalist.
No. I said, but that angle comes into...
It comes in. And it came in a big way. And for journalists, it meant adapting.
Yeah.
Because see, I came from a culture of... I grew up on these... on all these magazines where it was mainly profiles and interviews and match reports. Yeah. That was my orientation. That was my idea of sports journalism, and I was very comfortable doing that, and I was very confident of that. But when it went in the investigative side and then finding out what's happening in the BCCI and different federations, that to me, that did not come easily to me, So while I did a few interesting stories and a few stories like the one I just mentioned that I felt were good, for the most part, this was an adjustment that I struggled to make, where the focus suddenly became administration stories, so yeah, and things like match fixing, doping. When all these issues happen, the whole the focus of the job changes, and you have to adapt. Like one fantastic example of sports journalism comes to mind. I mean, so much of great sports journalism is because of investigations, right? You like offline, we were talking about baseball,
Yes.
and a big one of baseball's biggest unspoken secrets was the amount of doping that was going on.
Yes.
And I don't remember the details, but I know for a fact that there was this journalist who was interviewing a star player, and in the background he noticed a bottle, and he noted the label of that bottle, and he later on he went on to research that, and that sort of
Spiraled
led
the
him
whole
to
story.
yeah, and then the whole doping angle of
Yes.
baseball, and
That's
how
a big story. It was a very rampant use of
yeah,
anabolic steroids that was
yeah,
happening
yeah.
in baseball.
And at that time, there was this famous baseball record for home runs that was broken. There was a record that was created by Roger Maris, I think, if I get the name right.
Yeah.
And it was broken by some of the Mark McGuire, I think.
Yeah.
Some of the contemporary guys. But then a lot of it was doping. But it just shows how, you have to be hawk-eyed. And it was because the journalist noticed that bottle. And I think that also then led to the whole Balco laboratory where so many of these sports stimulants, so to speak, that had a link with Olympic athletes, baseball players, and, the whole thing unraveled.
Then
And
even
so-
cricket and all, it took a little bit of time, right? The testing and all. I don't think it was very common for team sports. It was more of a Olympic sport and all.
Yes.
They were very strict in terms of all those guidelines.
Yeah.
And I think the other sport, it took them also. There's a cultural shift also for them, for the players also
Yes,
to
yes.
understand that.
I think WADA came in a big way.
WADA came in a big way.
Anti-doping agency.
But there was a lot of resistance in India also from the cricket side, to getting into that protocol period of that.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. I also, because we were talking about sports personalities, right? The demographics of the sports personality is changing, right? The young Akshay Sawai found a fellow pen writer in probably the biggest superstar that time around. Of course, Sachin was there playing, but Sunil Gavaskar, and he shared the skill of writing with you. Maybe not your flair, but I prefer your writing more. But that's my personal preference. But what I meant to say is the profile, the demographics of these players is changing. Does that create a new challenge for the new age for a young Akshay Sawai today? How would he deal with with a Shubman Gill or one of these younger players? Does that change completely in terms of?
No, I feel. See again. I feel the basics remain the same, and then see if you if you create a good decent body of work, if you're starting out, okay, and if you see things, people can sense things, okay. So if there is a journalist who's young, who's starting out, if he or she is good, word will get around, okay. And while that person may not be able to may not have direct access to a Shubman Gill, word will get around in the ecosystem and it will indirectly reach a Shubman Gill. And once that happens, the rest will follow. So I feel the basics remain the same.
And probably in his own way, he must be as articulate as a Sunil Gavaskar of those times. He may not use the pen, but in his own way, he may use another medium, but he will be as articulate about the sport, right? So for the sports journalist, knowledge about the sport will be is still critical.
Of course. Domain knowledge, whatever journalist you are, whether it's politics, whether it's cinema, whether it is sports, domain knowledge comes first, even above language, I feel. You have to know the game. You have to know the structure also now, because because now you have to know what's going on in the administration as well.
True.
You have to know
the business side of sports.
The business side of sports has become very important. You look at football journalism today. One of the most probably one of the most important genres of football writing is the transfer season.
Yeah, I agree.
Whoever can scoop news of which player is going where is a very influential journalist today. And there's an Italian journalist, I forget his name, who has a huge following because he's on the ball with these things. So again, it depends on yours. Like there are many of these offshoots that you can specialize in.
Correct.
You may not be, so that football writer need not be someone who can say read the game or can, the technical side of it. But he's so strong on the transfer aspect of it and on the business aspect of it that then that becomes his or her niche. And it's a very influential niche to have.
That's interesting. I wanted to ask you, with changing times, is the pro still important for something like a match report and the relevance of a match report in today's time? Also with AI coming in. So personally, I know you don't cover sport day to day.
Yes.
But you must be also following it.
I follow it and I still enjoy reading a good article.
Would you read you'd still consume a good match report?
If it's well written, yes.
Match report.
Of course.
Yes.
Totally.
Yeah.
And so again, I'll say, so it's a combination of things, right? You have to be true to what you are good at, and you have to balance that with what it is that the market needs. So if writing is your thing, you should not ignore it. You should sort of focus on it and writing well if that's your thing. So and of course marry it with, you can't get carried away with your own prose.
Correct.
You have to balance. You have to then keep the word limit in mind. You have to keep people's attention spans in mind. But that does not mean you should ignore it. So be true to yourself. What is your real strength? And balance it with a few other supplementary, call it complementary skills and requirements of the job. I think it will still, writing. Also, the thing with writing is it teaches you to organize information in your head. It teaches you communication. It teaches you expression. And so even if your medium changes, that's going to come in handy, So if you are, maybe currently you're in the print medium and 3 years down the line, you're going to be on YouTube or your own platform or on a digital platform. But the skills that writing has taught you are going to help you there also. So, and just to clarify about going back to that Sunil Gavaskar in the press box thing, I mean, he just came and he wrote. We didn't have an interaction there. But then he noticed me and he said, he made that light-hearted remark that, okay, we are the only two guys who are writing by hand. And
so before you, I did an episode with Devendra Prabhudesai, who was with PMG and BCCI. And he said he's pretty hands-on even with the sports management company, and he would probably write his own pieces.
No, huge admiration for Sunil Gavaskar because for our generation there were three gods, okay, in terms of pop culture: Gavaskar, Kapil Dev, Amitabh Bachchan. Okay. And then, of course, Doordarshan started showing a lot of tennis. So then Bjorn Borg, John McEnroe, Steffi Graf, Chris Evert, Martina. That was our pantheon. But Gavaskar was, of course, a huge, huge figure. And because he was multifaceted, that's what and very disciplined. That is why what I personally like about him. And right from the start, so before he was 30, he had not only established himself as one of the world's great batsmen, he had also authored books. He was also a columnist. He also had a sense of fun. He had acted in a movie. Maybe movie happened. No, even that was before
even
30.
The Marathi film.
Yeah, he acted in a movie. He would like singing. He would like great mimic. he would do modeling. So multifaceted guy, very disciplined, made time for everything. And it's not like I know him very well or
Yeah.
something. I have interacted with him
Yeah.
a few times. But these are things I have observed, and these are out there. I think Idols, Runs and Ruins, his initial books.
Yes.
He was in his 20s then.
20.
And so it takes a certain kind of personality to be able to do all these things, and he's carried that on even now. He's 75.
Yes, sports journalists. Who are the guys, sports journalists, who have left a lasting impression on you in your initial days and even now? Who are the, if you had to choose three sports journalists, probably and across mediums also. Probably you'd like to want to pick up somebody from the audiovisual medium in today's times, or a little earlier. Who are the people who come to your mind?
Yeah, it would be more than three. So I'll say I'll go back to childhood again.
Yes.
So I would read Nirmal Shekhar was a tennis writer for Sports Star. So he had a very poetic style, and we all read him. Then there was R. Mohan, who was a cricket writer. There was Ayaz, who used to write in Sports Week, later Midday. Then Sports Star would carry a lot of syndicated content. So there used to be a lot of articles from Tennis Magazine, World Soccer Monthly, New York Times. Then Veer Sanghvi, who I worked with. I mean, not directly, but he was, when I was with HT, he was here, and we interacted a bit, and he always had a nice word for the sports coverage. And what I liked about, one thing you can take, again, a lesson for young journalists is, he was to have more than one specialty. You should always have, say, 2-3 things that you're strong on. So what Veer Sanghvi's success shows is, so he was a political writer on the one hand, and then he also covered food. He wrote with a lot of passion on food. So it's good to have a backup. And so there used to be a guy called Ambarish Mishra at Times of India, who would again cover Maharashtra politics at one level, but was very technically proficient in classical music, the writing, stage, and all that. That whole Marathi culture scene. So he had your Maharashtra politicians on speed dial, and he had Asha Bhosle and Lata Mangeshkar also on speed dial. So have try and cover at least 2-3 different things. So that just sort of broadens your horizons and gives you a cushion to fall back on in case one thing doesn't work out.
Also, just wanted to know from you.
I must also mention one more name, Manu Joseph.
Yes.
Who's just highly. I worked quite closely with him. He was my editor at Open, and a completely unique character with a unique take on things, and very straightforward, honest, upright person. No bullshit guy.
I wanted to mention Manu Joseph, but I'm going to do that a little later, and then you'll realize why.
Okay.
You'll realize why. Because I know you worked with them.
Yes.
I think you were doing some real special work at the Open magazine, right? Because as people who of our vintage, India Today, Outlook, and then these were the contemporary magazines.
Yeah.
And then suddenly from somewhere, you guys came through, Manu Joseph, the editor, you were the sports editor over there.
Yeah.
And there's pretty magical stuff over there. Like, you were doing some cutting edge.
I'm glad you liked it.
I enjoyed so many of your articles over there. You know, that's where I discovered you first, because you're not quintessential Bombay boy. Otherwise, I would have read you in the Midday much earlier.
Yeah.
But Open the magazine was that was the website, right?
That was the website. That was
so,
the website.
So that's,
Can I mention another name?
Yes.
Pradeep Vijayakar.
Oh yes. Yeah.
Pradeep Vijayakar. Again, a classic example of someone who just knew the sport inside out. He had played at a decent level, actually. Pradeep was a contemporary of Gavaskar's, and they were, I think, college mates at St. Xavier's, and very, very good cricketer himself. And again, knew various sports, from cue sports to kabaddi to, of course, cricket. And he just loved being around the Maidan, So even though he became senior enough and rose enough to cover international matches, he would also go, when he had time, he would just go to the Maidan. And so again, that was something really admirable about him. So many, actually, all the names are now coming, and I must mention them because otherwise it's unfair. Clayton Marzullo.
Yes.
Learned so much from him. That entire full midday team.
Yeah.
That initial midday team, starting from Ayaz to then Clayton, because Clayton was, again, had the test cricketers on speed dial, but also knows the entire Mumbai circuit.
And also for the uninitiated or people not in Mumbai, I'd just like to tell, because Sharda Ogra said that when she was also at midday. You guys had to do it a little differently because your edition came out in the afternoon, right, in Bombay. Yeah. So you couldn't just rely on the match report. It had to be different from what people had already read in the morning.
You had to think of a different angle.
Correct.
Or you had to get some extra quotes beyond the press conference. So I remember my first match, the first outstation assignment for midday was the Wills Trophy. And it was in Pune. And Saurav Ganguly had done well in that match. And I walked, as the match was getting over, it became clear to me that Saurav is my story. He had not made the India team at that point. This was 95. And so I walked halfway within the ground itself. From the boundary rope, I walked as the match was getting over.
Yeah.
I probably took the wrong gate or something. I could have gone out and, out of the stadium and come back from a different gate. But I just ended up walking along the boundary side. All the spectators and the players are just looking at me like, who's this kid just walking by, and then the match got over. I waited near the dressing room. हमको भी fielding लगाना पड़ता था. So near the dressing room, I लगा out fielding.
Yeah.
And then when I saw Saurav, and I said, I'm from Midday. And Midday was a big paper then. So they would talk to you. And so then Saurav spoke to me. Again, 3-4 questions, which is enough for a 300-400 word story, And you had to think of another angle, or you had to get extra quotes. Quotes that the other guys did not have.
I also wanted to talk to you about certain the use of social media and the OTT platforms, which has had a positive effect on certain sporting disciplines. So I'll just give you this example, and then probably you'll have your views on it.
Yeah.
Bernie Ecclestone was somebody who ran for 30-40 years. He ran the F1.
Yeah.
He ran it with an iron fist, and he did not think too much about social media, did not allow the players to be on social media. There was a lot of restrictions in terms of them being on then what we call Twitter, now today X, stuff like that. Players could not make their own videos and post it, and the YouTube and all. There was a lot of restrictions for them.
I had no idea about this.
Yeah. So though I wanted to give you the story. And then Liberty Media takes over, buys out Bernie Ecclestone from the F1. Liberty Media is an American company. Now, you know that in America, F1 had never caught that popularity like, say, NASCAR. They had their own NASCAR and stuff like that. Yeah. But F1 was more considered to be a European sport rather than, of course, and then it goes global, but did not catch the fancy of the Americans.
Yeah.
But Liberty Media did something different. Then what they did was they commissioned this Netflix documentary series.
Yeah.
All right. And it was also during the pandemic time.
Yeah.
The Americans, though, it was not a sport that they were very conversant with. They got hooked onto this documentary.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Today, and because America being the large market that it is, today it is... it has the maximum number of new races are happening in America. There's almost, I think, 3, if not 4. And there's a 11th car that is being added now. That is Cadillac is coming in as, one of the new...
teams?
Is one of the new teams, the 11.
Okay.
And the precursor to all this is a Netflix documentary.
Wow.
So I feel that somewhere, if we are running a
It's the
sporting
Netflix
discipline,
it's the Netflix
because
effect.
Netflix is not doing live sport,
Huh.
right? They are not doing live sport. No, they must be doing a little bit. I may be getting it wrong. Maybe an NBA match here, there. Amazon has got into it, right? All these guys are also
Yeah.
contemplating all this, like
Yeah.
how we have Geo over here.
Yeah.
But Netflix has got this huge success, and it works symbiotically for them as well as the sporting discipline.
Yeah.
So today you have maximum number of races happening in America, and because it's a huge market that it is.
Yeah.
You feel that something like this? Have you seen this kind of stories happening? So I'll just give you some figures. So pre this Netflix series, there were about 18 million viewer base of F1 in America. It has grown to 115 million.
Seriously.
All right.
Wow.
The TV ratings was about for the races used to be about 500,000 pre documentary. Now it is almost 3 times to 1.5 million.
Wow.
And similarly the fan base.
Yeah.
So this is like one of those phenomenal things that something
So you're
like
saying
Netflix.
a documentary just boosts the popularity of a
Documentary
sport?
and these OTT platforms.
Yeah.
There is something that is happening. What do you feel about sports documentaries as such? You feel that it's a good medium to propagate a sporting discipline? I ask because I'm basically a sports analyst.
Yeah.
I work on sporting disciplines.
Yeah.
So the role of sports documentaries.
I mean, see, if it's a well-made one, then of course it can be, it can really, I think, tell a story well, and it can, whether it's selling us and it can sell a sport as well without obviously being too salesy. But the Last Dance.
The Last Dance.
The Last Dance is one documentary that I really liked, you know. And of course, they got access to the GOAT himself, Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
I mean, so in a way, the Bulls and all that was a very 90s thing. But I think what that documentary showed is it's a medium that can recapture a certain era and simply, simply educate whether journalists or fans on just what was accomplished by these guys, So in that sense, the and a well-made documentary can still be a great vehicle to spread the message of a sport or of an individual. Even the Maradona documentary by Asif Kapadia.
Yes,
I'm a big Maradona fan, huge, and I sort of started. Initially I did not like Maradona too much. I thought he was in your face and that hand of God and all. But the more I then completely became his biggest fan, simply because that he was such a personality, tremendous personality, just 5 feet 4 inches, but he had that confidence and take on the best defenses in the world, and also he had a love for the game. The way he smiled when he was with a football till the end. There are a lot of people who sometimes lose that childlike love for the game, But Maradona, he still retained that love. If he got a ball, he would just start playing with it, juggling it. So So again, the Maradona documentary on Asif Kapadia was a great one.
I don't know if he's similarly made one on Ayrton Senna. Right?
He has.
And that's also very celebrated as a documentary. Yes. Very. Like people really talk very highly about that. Whenever.
And then there are two kinds of documentaries: past events or figures like The Last Dance or Maradona, and then current ones.
Yes.
The F1, or then there was also a tennis one, I think, where they're just following the current players.
Yeah, they follow the current players on the ATP tour.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's a good way to follow, because I did not know about Iga Swiatek and those players, and pretty interesting personalities, right? Sabalenka, I saw her in a completely new light, and it was also when, because she could not play under the Belarus flag and all that
Yeah,
stuff,
yeah,
and then
yeah.
she was facing a lot of hostility also on the
Yeah.
It was pretty interesting
Yeah,
that
yeah.
they follow the ATP tour,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
of course, tennis is your favorite sport, right?
It is my favorite
It's your
sport,
favorite
yes.
sport. So we'll cover tennis in detail. So I just wanted, you were telling me about one documentary that you saw on probably the footwear.
Yeah. Adidas versus Puma.
Very
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
Yeah.
So again, and also it's so the thing is how some subjects are almost eternally fascinating.
Yeah.
Right. So Adidas versus Puma, two brothers. Okay. I mean, what are the chances? Two brothers, each of one starts a brand that becomes like very successful. Of course, Adidas is much bigger, but and so that was a documentary of, and the irony that both are German, both sort of rise in the around the same time as World War II, or the Nazi supremacy.
Yes.
Those years. Okay.
Yeah.
But their key, the people who are going to make their product a success are black athletes. So to me that's just a fascinating juxtaposition. And in fact, Jesse Owens was one of the guys who wore Adidas shoes at the 1936 Olympics.
Oh, at the Olympics.
Yeah.
I thought probably after his exploits over there.
No.
No.
The story goes that Jesse Owens, while he was going to Berlin, in transit, lost his shoes, and then Adi Dassler, who founded the Adidas founder, he lent him shoes. Probably they were not branded as Adidas then, or probably didn't have that logo then, but they were from Adi Dassler, who's a white German guy.
Yeah.
During Hitler's Olympics.
Yes.
But he sort of markets the shoe through a black athlete. So to me, that's it's just fascinating. And also then over the years, watching these brands through our own favorite players, so Boris Becker, another huge impact on our generation.
Yes.
Just this 17-year-old
17-year-old
kid comes and wins Wimbledon. So he used to wear Puma. Then all the footballers of that time, athletes of that time would wear Adidas. Sachin then signed up with Adidas at some point.
Adidas had that Hellwood effect about
Yeah. So following these brands, so that was another reason to be interested in the documentary, because one always noticed these brands, like at least I would always notice, okay, what is this guy wearing? What is Steffi Graf wearing? And another fascinating thing is, so of course, to go back to the irony, another very major historical moment from the sports and racism point of view was during the 1968 Olympics, when Tommy Smith and his teammate, they raised a black fist to protest against
racial discrimination in America.
And then they were wearing Adidas, So I always find contrasts quite fascinating.
Yeah. Sports and geopolitics, and we are seeing most of it play now. What's your take on the present handshake fiasco?
Hot topic. I'll pass.
You'll pass?
Yeah. Okay. Personally, I don't see any problem with a handshake.
Yeah.
No,
I'd rather not play there. I mean, I see. We can't be naive about the fact that it's a hostile country towards us.
It
right?
is.
It's an hostile country, and then there some of the cricketers also. It's a theocratic country, so there will be these statements that come out which sound obnoxious to us, and naturally.
Yeah.
But if you play on a field, and I think it was also I think there's certain grammar of a sport. I think we just.
That's a nice way to put it. A nice way to put it.
So
and yes, you're right that the hostility can't be ignored.
And it's not ignored by the Western world also, right? Look what they did with all the Russian athletes, right?
Yeah.
In on the tennis circuit, right?
Yeah.
The two most successful were Russians, and even
Yeah.
Medvedev was like almost he was
Yeah.
So I find that that we can't be naive that there is no politics
No, because
associated.
and see 2004 or 2005 when that Aman Ki Asha tour
Yeah, yeah,
happened to
yeah,
Pakistan.
yeah.
Everything was very.
But that
There
was
was
a
optimism.
political direction
Yes.
given by our prime minister also, right?
Yes,
Means
yes.
Vajpayee had the policy was that, right?
Yes.
Jaake dil jeet ke aao, and whatever they did was separate.
yeah.
But
And
but it was
despite-
mirroring. It was mirroring what their objective was, right? Sport has always been used.
Yeah, so
as
I'm
a
saying
medium.
the effort was made, but from the other side, then you have the Mumbai attacks.
Yes.
Just 3-4 years after that series, and
Yeah,
then
yeah.
something like that is hard to overlook.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. You've covered some of the greatest sporting personalities, and as I listed, my audience will understand that how blessed we are to have you here today. But first,
Very nice of you to say that. Yeah.
No. Your work states that. First, let's take this magnificent game of tennis,
Yeah.
right? Which you also love. There's something about racket sport. One of your former colleagues was here. In fact, he mentioned you, Abhijit Kulkarni. His definitive book on badminton.
Another very
is-
good journalist,
Yes.
very strong on different disciplines, and a quick learner.
And he was somebody who had a lot of. He said that Akshay was one of my editors who gave me a lot of freedom to go and cover
Yeah.
badminton, and that's where I
Yeah.
built. So my audience knows who Akshay Sawai, the editor, is. But Akshay, the point was Indian tennis has had a huge legacy, right? Right from the days of Ramanathan Krishnan to Vijay Amritraj to the doubles pairing of Leander and Mahesh.
Yeah.
How do you see this sport?
Yeah, so there's always been, I think India has a strong history in tennis.
Yeah.
There's a decent amount of following also, especially in the 80s and 90s, the following was a lot. Problems remain in the way the sport is run in the country. So nearly every Olympics, there is some selection controversy or the other.
True.
Or even at times with Davis Cup. So and again, this is if it's not it's not one rebellious player who's saying that or two players who are saying that. This goes back a long way. Back in 1993, I remember we had a great run to the Davis Cup semis when we beat France on clay in Frejus. And the tennis association, they earned like in excess of 1 crore, which was a big sum at that time, including television fees and Davis Cup prize money and all that. But Ramesh Krishnan and Leander Pace, who were the stars of that campaign, they actually had to fight for more money. They said, no, we deserve more. So it's always been, I guess that's where the problem lies, why we are not producing that many singles players. And, if that is fixed, then I think we'll see more players at the top. Potential is always there. There's simply no reason why, as the cliche goes, a country with so many people, why it shouldn't have more players. I guess the talent is there, but the sport definitely needs to be run better.
A legacy sport, of course, and it's a global sport. I was hearing Vijay Amritraj speak recently. He was feted by the Indian government, and he also called it the second most global sport after soccer. And there is something about both the sports at a recreational level. I think both soccer and tennis thrive in this country, right? In India, but maybe at a competitive level, it'll take time. It's also an expensive sport to pursue. But our generation was very blessed because we saw singles players who were doing well, right?
Yeah.
Just imagine, probably it was 1987 when Ramesh Krishnan, and he was not 89. It was when he beat Mats Wilander, the number one player in the world.
Yeah.
Well, today it's like somebody beating, an Indian player beating Nadal or something like that, right?
That too at a Grand Slam.
Yeah. And it was not a fluke because he was a top 16 player at one point.
Ramesh was a fantastic player, both Ramesh and Ramanathan Krishnan, because they had just great touch, very elegant players. And word was that, if Ramesh was playing, the pros themselves would go out of the dressing room and watch him play, because he was playing a style that was fast going out of becoming extinct, but he was just so good to watch, and he made it look so simple that the pros, that's the ultimate sign of respect. Pros themselves would go out of the dressing room and they would go courtside and watch him play. They used to call him the surgeon or something. Yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah. But it's also a sport which is an individual sport in terms of its grammar and in terms of its following, right? Your favorite players will transcend boundaries. Of course, if you are from Serbia, naturally you will be towards Djokovic, or if you are towards, if you are from Spain, naturally Nadal or an Alcaraz will. But it's a sport that transcends boundaries, right? It's an individual sport.
Yeah.
So, how would you define these eras? If you had to pick between John McEnroe and Jimmy Connors, do you have a take on that?
Yeah, of course, because that was the era that I grew up on. So I followed these guys very closely.
It's called the Open era also, right?
Open era started from 1968.
68.
That's when all the players could compete together and earn as professionals. Earlier, there was a segregation between professionals and amateurs. So talking about Connors and McEnroe, both guys brought a lot of personality to tennis. They were two bad boys. They were not politically correct. Both of them hated each other. So there was a lot of edge that they brought to the sport. Between the two, of course, McEnroe was I liked McEnroe's style more because he was just a complete artist, and you use the word grammar often, so he had his own grammar, simply the way he hit the ball. And he would take the ball on the rise, on the serve and everything, and he would go back like this, which no coaching manual will teach you, but that's what worked from him. Great touch on the ball, great personality. But Connors also very feisty. Connors was the Nadal of his time, just the ultimate fighter.
In a way.
Ultimate fighter, and never gave up. And at age 39, he had made it to the semi-finals of the US Open, I remember, in 1991, which was a big deal then. But at that time, nobody played till 39.
Yeah.
Now it's fairly common. Federer played till he was 40. Federer retired when he was official retirement was when he was 41. Nadal played till his late 30s. Djokovic is still going strong, almost 40. But Connors
was there because I remember watching him even into the 90s.
Yes.
And sometimes he would just go into the fourth round or the quarterfinals.
Yeah.
I saw him play one match against Agassi, and I don't know whether he lost the match. I think Agassi won that match, but
it was a 5-setter.
Yeah. Isn't that a famous match where there's a guy sitting with a placard saying that Agassi, you may be great, but that guy's a legend, or I don't know what
I don't know about that, but he had. I think he had a close match with Agassi at the US Open, and 91 US Open. Like I said, he reached the semi-finals at age 39, which was and I think he was an asthmatic.
Yes.
So great fighter, and again his own. He had a distinct style of playing. So while topspin had started coming into the sport, Connors would hit flat and deep, which made it difficult to sort of return his shots. He would play very close to the baseline, which Djokovic does excellently now. If you look at one of Djokovic's key strengths, that he plays the ball very deep. So the opponent does not get a short ball to attack.
Did you sometimes get bored with the just now? Even that generation is passing by, right? The Federer, the Nadal, Djokovic, even Andy Murray, the Fab Four. just very nice guys. And did you find tennis boring as compared to when we initially got initiated into
Yeah.
it, Daily and Nastase, or the
Yeah.
John Newcombs or Connors and McEnroe, who we've
Yeah.
mentioned?
Yeah.
Did you find it boring in terms of that the
Yeah.
personalities were
Yeah. So
vanilla?
Newcomb and Nastase were probably a little
Little
before my
ahead,
time,
yeah.
but
But their antics
there
were
was
still available
yeah,
on.
yeah,
Yeah,
totally, and of course McEnroe and Connors were.
yeah,
So obviously these guys were not like that. This is a different era, and everybody talks about how they should show their personality a little more. But now there's a lot at stake if you even do something a little controversial. So players tend to be a little safe on that front. But no, I did not get bored because
The
the
tennis
tennis
was of
was
high
just
quality.
fantastic. I mean, Federer, the elegance and the effortlessness was just, mesmerizing.
Yeah.
Likewise, Nadal's fighting spirit and and his innovation as a shot maker, Djokovic's mental strength, his consistency, his mastery of the basics, to just not miss a single ball for like he'll hit like 100 shots without missing one. So all of that has been his flexibility, his reach, the way he stretches. He's like Spider-Man. Like he's so flexible.
Yeah, that's
He's
amazing.
elastic.
Yeah,
Like
it's
so,
obvious.
each of these big three brought a certain had a USP. So the tennis more than made up for it, I would say, than the last.
One more character I'd like to bring about is just as the Connor McEnroe era was this thing, a guy comes up called Ivan Lendl.
Yes, he was my favorite.
Quiet, silent,
Yeah,
not too many words.
yeah.
Was he the precursor to what we see today?
In many ways,
nonsense,
because
this thing.
he pioneered a lot of the training methods and diet. So when Lendl came on the scene, of course he was promising and everything, but he was finding it hard to convert it into Grand Slam success. He would reach so there was a mental aspect also, and then he figured out that he was eating wrong as well. Like, and there was this doctor called Robert Haas, who him, Martina Navratilova, all of these guys consulted, and that sort of revolutionized the game. And so in that sense, yeah, Lendl was a precursor. And then, of course, the other guy who's revolutionized diet or increased the awareness is Djokovic. Because this whole gluten-free thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I personally did not even know that there is such a thing as gluten intolerance. I only learnt about it when I read about Djokovic. And he changed his diet around in 2010. And he was a transformed player. 2011 onwards. 2011 he won 3 Grand Slams.
Yeah.
So so that was also, it's very interesting how I think guys like Djokovic, even Virat Kohli, how their diet has just had an impact beyond sports as well. Veganism, gluten, all these things that different people are now are experimenting with, and there's awareness.
You mentioned Martina Navratilova.
Yeah.
It's also one of the first original sports where women representation, and it does not need any support. It's got its own charm. It's got its own popularity as much as the men's, right?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So take us back to Martina Navratilova to Chris Evert. Chris Evert was this fairy tale, like the model American girl, right?
Exactly.
And she's turning out to be quite different nowadays. Pretty controversial in terms of her personal life, and even in a commentary, she receives quite a bit of criticism because of her opinions. But women's tennis is also equally.
Yeah, I think tennis is the number one women's sport.
Number one.
In terms of women's sports. So the Martina, Chris, that rivalry defined the 80s.
Yeah.
And again, they were, like with many great rivalries, what made it interesting was the contrast. Chris was this very beautiful all-American lady, very ladylike. At the same time, a tough competitor. And Martina came from Eastern Europe. Chris was right-hander. Chris was a right-hander. Martina was a left-hander. Then Martina was a serve and volleyer. Chris Evert was a baseliner. So it was a great contrast, and I mean, it was just it was expected that final in dono mein hi hone wala hai.
Yes.
You know?
In the initial few years, it
Yeah.
was like that.
Yeah.
And my mom did not follow sport, but she knew Martina Navratilova was, and so she would call it Wimbledon tennis.
Yeah,
She
yeah,
would call
yeah.
tennis Wimbledon tennis because,
Yeah.
that's the only sport that would play around and look little glamorous.
Yeah.
And all matches would not be broadcast, right? It was only from the quarterfinal stage that we would
Semis
see.
and finals. I
Semis
think
and
Doordarshan
finals.
would only show semis and
And
finals.
she always remembered that young 17-year-old boy who won the Wimbledon. 85.
Boom, boom. Yes,
Boom.
yes,
How
yes.
special was he? At 17 to do it must have been, he must have been a special talent.
Incredible.
Right?
Yeah. Still the youngest winner of
Yeah.
Wimbledon, and it's going to be a hard record to break. So I remember that summer very clearly because see, some people just have this presence,
Yeah.
and Boris Becker had presence. You can't deny that. He's had a very controversial post-retirement life,
Yeah.
but he had great presence, and he just played like nobody else before had played. Like he would dive for volleys, right? That's what people, he made it exciting, he brought adrenaline into the sport. It's like tennis, which was, say, if tennis was a movie, the genre was, say, drama, but Becker made it action, and just 17, very boyish. He would walk like this, and he would tap the ball along as he walked. So it was huge when he just arrived on the scene. He became a global superstar, and very few, I think, athletes in history have had, that incredible meteoric rise as he did. Probably Tendulkar comes close because he was just 16
Yes.
when he played for India.
That's actually
unthinkable.
almost freakish, right?
It is
Till
freakish.
Rahul Dravid in that memorable lecture, I think it was a Patodi lecture or something, he said
Yes.
probably at 16, and their careers probably ended up pretty similar. In terms of stature, they're pretty much close.
Yes.
Tendulkar may be a little bit more special. But he says at 16, I'd probably even not get into my college or school team when this guy was already playing India. So it was almost freakish. And it was a cautionary note he was sounding out to parents because he said that at 16 you don't develop.
Yeah.
That kid was... it was almost freakish for Tendulkar to having developed and blossomed into a test cricketer at that young
just
age.
incredible talent and incredible love for the game.
Yeah.
Which,
But then it's also a God-given gift, right? It's a God-given gift for these
but I
guys.
think he was also
Also you have to have the talent. But at 16 to do it is a little
unthinkable.
beyond the norm, right?
Yeah.
Maybe cautionary notes for a lot of parents, because now this is also...
No, you mentioned parents, please don't pressurize your kids, because I've heard of many cases of parents just pushing kids, whether it's sports or academics, and then, just burdening them. And, these are years to really develop on your own and, have a sense of joy about life, So, and I know many coaches who've laid down strict instructions that parents can't even attend the practice sessions. So, you lose your relationship with your child. I'm sorry to be blunt, but that's what will happen. Your child will end up hating you. So, yes, a certain amount of, nudging has to be there, but not too much, really. Don't put any pressure on them to become the next Sachin or the next Sundar Pichai.
Yes.
Don't do that.
But tennis, when we thought that the Fab Four and then whether tennis will be the same again, but the sport is blessed,
It
right?
keeps going.
Alcaraz
It
and
never
Sinner
stops. Yeah.
right up there.
Yeah. No, I would, okay. While I said that, sport, life goes on.
Yeah.
But that magic is going to be hard to replace. Alcaraz and Sinner they're great players, of course, but some of that magic, especially because Federer's artistry was off the charts. Nadal's fighting spirit was off the charts. His intensity was off the charts. Then Djokovic's cool precision was off the charts. So you had three different vintages almost to enjoy. Here it's still more of, while they're extraordinary players, Carlos and Yannick Sinner, Alcaraz and Sinner, it's still a bit machine-like, personally, for me. Alcaraz has that magic. He has that slight individualism. But overall, it's still a bit machine-like.
Yeah.
But there are these unique characters who, like there's a Quarantine Mute, or there's Bublik, Kyrgios when he occasionally plays.
Yeah.
They bring a little bit.
Well, I have a lot of time for him. Sometimes it gets, but he's so special, right? In terms of talent. Just talent. Poor fellow.
They can be very entertaining to watch.
Yeah. And for our generation, we watched Connors and McEnroe, and then, sometimes I would find it boring. I'd be like, I almost found them like, they were just too nice, all these guys, but didn't take away from the quality of tennis that they produced over the years. Naturally. Yeah. But because it's a sport that you love so much, it's a sport that you watched so much.
Yeah.
If I had to ask you your 3 favorite all-time players and why? It's a tough call, right? You've seen so much of tennis, so many great players. But
you have to. So, in terms of the GOAT debate, you have to go with Djokovic. You can't deny the numbers. He has, in terms of maximum number of slams, and his head-to-head record against Federer and Nadal is superior. You have to accept that. And he is the greatest. The only thing is, his head-to-head record against Nadal it got better only towards the end when Nadal was really struggling. Also, Nadal missed 18 Grand Slams due to injury. So I think had Nadal played even half of those, he would still be ahead in the overall Grand Slams. But as things stand, Novak Djokovic is the greatest of all time in men's tennis. In women's tennis, I would say it's a tie between Steffi Graf and Martina Navratilova. I know a lot of people would go for Serena, but for me, Steffi Graf and Martina even more so, because Martina was a pioneer. The serve and volley, the diet, the fitness. She won then across surfaces, and Graf as well. Just tremendous footwork. Even now, I mean, Graf was active probably 30 years ago, but I just sometimes watch her footwork. It's just beautiful. Likewise with Federer. I mean, people notice the elegance of the shots, but sometimes you just see the feet and it's just mesmerizing, So Djokovic in terms of greatest, Martina and Steffi in women's tennis. In terms of my favorite players who I've rooted for the most, it's Lendl and Federer.
Lendl too?
Yeah. Okay. I was a big Lendl fan because I used to feel he's the underdog. Nobody liked him. He was like the Djokovic of his time.
Yes.
And so I sort of used to root for him. And Sports Illustrated, which was like a Bible of sport journalism, they had come out with this incredibly harsh headline on Lendl once. That too after he won the US Open, the champion nobody cares about, which I thought was incredibly harsh. And, and so I used to root for Lendl a lot, and Federer after that. So these would be my favorites.
The 4 Grand Slams, do they also have their own distinct characteristics, personalities?
Yes. And I covered 2 of them.
You've covered 2, right? I was told that Akshay Sawai has been at the Wimbledon.
Yeah. Yes. Wimbledon and US Open. I've been to 2. I covered.
Tell us about your experiences.
Yeah. So Wimbledon, when I was just 24 years old, and it was the first time I was going abroad. And people didn't travel that much those
Yes.
days. Now everybody, even children, have been abroad and all that, right? So it was my first foreign trip, and I was carrying this heavy laptop, and I landed. I was we would get allowance to stay in a bed and breakfast kind of accommodation. And I thought, okay, I had heard that the station closest to the All England Club is Southfields. So after I went to my place where I was staying, I freshened up, had a bath. I set out for the All England Club. The heavy laptop cutting into me. I was exhausted after the flight, but I also wanted to get going. And I'm just going, and I think it was a Friday or Saturday when I reached. I had no idea that, the weekends in these places, especially in the residential areas, are just so quiet, very quiet, and not a soul around. And I'm walking, this brown boy in, with a heavy laptop. And I'm asking whoever I saw, I said, where's the All England Club? Because I just did not find it, because there's a station called Wimbledon. There's a station called Wimbledon Park. And there's a station called Southfields. Okay, those last three stations. And the club was somewhere in the middle. And I kept trying to find it. And finally I found the All England Club. And when I first saw Centre Court, I just sat there quietly. Because it was very quiet. And, I had only seen it in magazines and on TV. And I just sat there like I was in a temple or something. And actually, the initial couple of days were a little strange, because I just found I was feeling like a little homesick. I was, it was all too quiet for me initially. But once the tournament picked up, it was great fun, a lot of fun. And Wimbledon is a very happy event. They call the Australian Open the Happy Slam, but even Wimbledon, I have not been to the Australian Open.
Yeah.
But even Wimbledon, it's like a village fair atmosphere. Everybody, all the volunteers they are ready to help you with a smile. They're very courteous, very polite. The club is just beautiful. It's beautiful. And just the green grass, the sunlight, and they have some great. Then you see a McEnroe passing by, or a Becker, and then the food stalls. Strawberries are a bit overrated. There are much better things to have there. But very cheerful, well-organized tournament. That was Wimbledon. US Open, the character is different. New York City. My favorite city in the world is New York. Used to be New York. Not now. I'm little on the older side, so maybe not anymore. But when I was young, I would love New York and bustle and everything. But it was, and that's where I had the guts to strike up a conversation with McEnroe, who can be very temperamental and who can just ask you to, fuck off.
Yeah.
Like, without any reason. He'll just say that. But I was very young then, and he saw that I'm probably a kid, and I approached him very respectfully, so he answered a couple of questions. But that was 99. That was when Leander and Mahesh were doing very well. And so we would be sent by our organizations to cover these tournaments, so.
But how is the doubles thing? How is the doubles scene as compared to, is it part of the main draw, or does it have a
now
following?
Not anymore, but
not anymore.
Back then it still had.
Those time the Woody brothers would also be.
Yeah.
Woody, no, they're not brothers though, but the Woodies, the Aussies
were there.
Yeah.
Todd Woodbridge and Mark Woodford.
Yeah.
Then later on, the Bryan brothers came on the scene. Then there were a few other good pairs, and sometimes a lot of singles players would also play doubles. Like for example, Ivanisevic was like when Leander and Mahesh won the French Open, their first Grand Slam together. Ivanisevic was on the other side in I think in the finals. So it was Ivanisevic and I don't remember now. So singles players would occasionally play.
Yes, but
Rafter would play.
it
was-
was an eye opener for me once because I heard Vijay Amritraj. I think he was doing commentary with Alan Wilkins. I think,
Yeah.
right, for the
Yeah.
Wimbledon, and then I think the Queens happens just before the precursor to the
That's
Wimbledon.
the traditional warm-up,
Yeah,
yeah.
so I think he said the doubles is a different game because I think it was Leander and Mahesh playing Pete Sampras and Tim Henman at that point of time, and these guys won.
Yeah, they won. Yeah.
So
they won. Yeah.
the skill sets needed are a little different, probably.
They are
for
different.
the-
Yeah.
So though it's a similar sport, it's like probably
Yeah.
maybe that's something that cricket can take a leaf out of, right? T20 is a completely different beast.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
pretty unfair to expect a player to be an all-format player in
Yeah.
probably T20 cricket. So,
Yeah.
but that's about doubles. But it has its followings at these big Grand Slams. The doubles, was it?
Now I think it has gone down.
has
Now,
gone
and
down.
they have to come up with some kind of and I think they tried that at the US Open with mixed doubles. So see, it's still great to watch.
Yeah.
It's very fast.
Yeah.
And there are some serious skills that you need. It's just that it does not have the prestige of singles. That is a fact.
Did you cover Vijay? Have you spoken to Vijay? Have you spoken
Yeah.
to Leander, Mahesh? Your views?
Leander and Mahesh I covered very
Yes.
closely.
Yeah.
Very closely. I would
What do you make of the
regularly-
personalities?
You're putting me on the spot here.
Yeah.
I have to face an ace. I think Leander was the first to sort of become a star. And he was the one who saw the potential that he and Mahesh had as a pair. And then, of course, Mahesh proved to be a very able partner of his. So I think Leander is a kind of guy who likes to take the lead. He sees himself as the boss. Mahesh is the quieter sort, but probably also someone who's a little easier to deal with. Mahesh. And that is why much of the Indian tennis fraternity has found it easier to deal with Mahesh than with Leander, who can be a little unpredictable, moody, That's I think, I would say that. I can't say more.
No, I understand.
Because see, I mean, as great as Leander is, you have to, at the Rio Games, for example, he landed just 36 hours before the first match. He was playing with Rohan Bopanna, You can't do that. You have to, reach well in advance, practice together, then you have a chance. Also, if you're playing, great achievement to win that Olympic bronze.
Yes.
But then after Olympic bronze in one Olympics or two Olympics, at the most 3 Olympics, fine. But later on, it can't be 1 bronze in 7 Olympics,
Especially in doubles, they could have, with all their, they could have achieved more.
No, then too, you can't keep saying, oh, this is a great record.
Yeah.
I've played 7 Olympics. That's a great. No, so maybe it shows your longevity, but the returns in the overall analysis and for all the controversies, then on balance, is it a great record?
Akshay, another great sport and probably one of its greatest personalities. I'd probably say that sport has 2 great personalities. You've had the pleasure of having met one.
Yeah.
Boxing.
Yes.
Mike Tyson.
Yes.
Tell us about your experience of meeting Mike Tyson.
Just fantastic. I mean, believe me, it is the most thrilled I have been to meet a sports person. That was Mike Tyson, because again, such a huge personality, and we had heard these. He was larger than life. He was crazy, in an interesting way. At least, like the whole biting the Holyfield's ear and all that, and so it was a big thrill for me to meet. And I was like right here, and he was like, so my impression of him was, okay, he's not very big physically, but while he may be not very tall,
Yeah.
he's huge and he has huge hands and and he's just and the tattoo and everything. So all kinds of images were flooding in my mind. Hangover, then his famous fights. Like I remember there was this huge, very anticipated fight between him and Michael Spinks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because Spinks was 6'4" or something
Yeah,
in
yeah.
height. And I
Yeah.
remember that because it's the 80s, right? 89 or
Late
maybe
80s.
late 80s. Yeah, I remember
yeah,
that.
a lot of hype, and Don King was his
And
promoter.
those times, these matches used to be live on TV. It was not that pay TV kind
Yeah.
of, which I want to ask you about that sport also. But yes.
Las Vegas, I think, if I'm
Yeah.
not mistaken, that used to typically be there. And there's this hype, and then we read in the news that the bout is over in
Over.
90 seconds.
Yes.
I mean, that's how powerful and strong a fighter he was. So I met him. He had come here as to promote one martial arts event, and it was a very colorful, strange kind of event. There were some sheikhs around. There was Aditya Pancholi for some reason wearing sunglasses indoors. And there was Shera, Salman's bodyguard, who was in charge of the security and all that. So it was a very colorful event. And then Tyson was doing these quick one-to-ones. He did not give a lot of time. And his manager was, you're all waiting in a room, and there was this manager who was just like a typical manager. And he just told me, "You got a minute and a half, pal." And, so I had to ask my questions in 90 seconds, which is exactly how much it took for him to knock out Michael Spinks. But anyway, so we one good thing about experience is
Yes.
that then you know what kind of tempo to maintain. You then don't. Another thing for journalists, please keep your questions short. I see a lot of journalists asking long-winded questions,
Yeah.
showing off their knowledge, and just keep the question short. So when I heard I had 90 seconds, I kept the question short. Just tut. First fight is, what did you do?
Yeah.
And I remember I asked him, like, when he first got his first big paycheck after he became a star, what did he do with it? So he just said, "I don't know, man, I bought a lot of stuff, a lot of cars, Rolls Royces and mansions and stuff like that." So and then he said, I asked him about the movie experience. A lot of waiting, doing the same thing again and again. So great experience. Just some of these figures, because they are so mythical.
But along with Muhammad Ali, probably the two most popular and
Yeah.
probably, because the sport has changed, right? From a
Yeah.
mass sporting product, it has become a pay for TV kind
I
of a
don't even
product.
know,
Yeah,
like,
we don't
what
even know.
happens
Like, though we
nowadays.
hear about Manny Pacquiao and,
Yeah.
the present, but it's not, they don't have the same charm about
Yeah.
them as
Yeah.
probably what Muhammad Ali and probably
Yeah.
Mike Tyson brought.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe a little bit of Evander Holyfield to some extent, but
Yeah.
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 But it's a fascinating sport, makes for great documentaries and great films, right?
Yeah,
The
great.
sport.
Yeah. Raging Bull, of course.
Yes.
Then Rocky.
Rock.
Yeah. And also, I mean, since we are talking about journalism, I think boxing has also
Some of the best.
spawned some of the best sports
Writing.
writing. Yeah. And of course, there were figures like Muhammad Ali who just, I mean, he made great copy,
Correct.
wherever he went.
True.
Because he was just so interesting and colorful.
Colorful.
I mean, imagine a guy, he's about to fight George Foreman, okay, and he goes up to his room or something. Now, I don't know exactly, but he just goes to his hotel or something and teases him, just needles him before a fight and antics like that. So, just great personalities, I think. I think what draws a lot of fans to sports, apart from their excellence and their proficiency, is also the personality element, which probably was greater in our time, I feel.
Yeah. Absolutely. Because
whether it's Viv Richards, Imran Khan, your Martina,
Yeah.
Chris Evert, or
So tell us more about your interactions with Imran.
Oh,
What do you make of him as a person?
yeah, yeah. So one was that phone thing. Then I met him once when he had come for there was this very glamorous event at Mahalakshmi Racecourse. I think it was a vintage car expo slash rally, and all the A-listers were there. I remember Shah Rukh Khan was there, and he was there in some capacity. So there I got to speak to him for 5 minutes. I was doing a story on I was doing a couple of stories. At that time I had just joined Open, so I was doing a story on Dhoni's leadership and Imran being one of the great leaders in cricket history. I had taken his bites for the story. And then I did a short. I was in that space where I think Open was yet to launch, but we had started working on the stories. But I was also then free to contribute. So then I filed a small spot story for Midday also. So I asked him about a few things. So my sense of him was, I mean, again, very upright in some ways, like
Yes.
there was this criticism, and it was true that if you were playing in Pakistan, the umpires will, even if the ball hits your pad, even if it's outside leg stump, off stump,
Yeah.
whichever stump, you will be given LB. So the whole, biased Pakistani umpiring was a huge thing. He himself brought neutral umpires
Yeah.
because he wanted to,
Build credibility.
yeah, and he wanted to win fair and square. He didn't want people to say that, oh, you won only because of your umpires. Another thing so that is one thing that was quite admirable. And then just, he wins the World Cup,
Yeah.
and then he just closes that chapter of his life, and he erects a cancer hospital out of nothing, on pure will, on pure donations. And even his worst critics will say that he is not corrupt in the money, in terms of money and all that, so he used every rupee for that hospital, and that hospital offers free treatment, or you pay what you can afford. I mean, that is such a huge contribution. Leave aside the politics, and later on, of course, he became prime minister and all that. I think that just says something about the guy.
Yeah, and it's a tough country, right? He could have taken the easier route out of
he could
just gone and stayed in another country, which is
could
a
have
norm,
lived like a king,
which is a norm in that part of the world, right?
Yes.
But that tenacity and his grit to fight it out from jail.
Yeah. And everyone says that in terms of money and so on, he's incorruptible. Very upright that way.
Yeah.
The only thing I did not like about Imran was, without getting into the political views and all that, was when he disowned his daughter from Sita White. That to me was, that was disappointing, I would say. He should have, it was his own daughter. And
Flawed character, but a great cricketer, great sports person, right? Yeah. One of the fascinating characters of probably our growing up years in sport.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm not making I'm not making a moral judgment on his relationship with Sita White.
Yes.
To not accept that the child is his.
Yes.
That was not on, Viv Richards, when that happened with Viv Richards, it's not like he accepted that, Masaba is his daughter. So he should not have disowned her. That's what I'm saying.
True. There are flawed things about him, but I think probably one of the most inspirational. But even with his politics, not the greatest of things for India if he comes back to power, but his undoubtedly their most popular leader,
Yeah.
and he could have taken the easier route out, and he could have come back into politics the way the others, the Nawaz Sharifs, have come
He
back,
could
the
have cut a
Benazirs.
deal.
Yeah, cut
He
a
could have
deal,
cut
or
a deal,
even
yeah.
come back, when his time is appropriate.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it shows also the way he played
Yeah.
his sport.
He's not cutting a deal. No.
Yeah. So, Akshay, we've seen some of your videos. We know you have that side to you. We do this segment basically where we bring films and sport together. And I do it in a lighter vein, but
Yeah.
I also feel that films is a great way to basically propagate a story of a sport, a sports personality, or something like that.
Yeah.
Rich coverage of sport. And, you come from Manu Joseph, you have high regard for him. You
Yes.
spoke about him. He's written a fantastic OTT. I haven't seen Madhavan so quirky and so entertaining in that decoupled. I think it's a Manu Joseph writing.
Yeah.
So does Akshay Sawai have a script with him in the making for an OTT or something like that?
Not for an OTT.
Yeah.
There is, I do a lot of writing work aside from my day job.
Yeah.
I can't talk about it
Yeah.
right now, but no, nothing that is like nothing that is for a show or a movie or anything of that sort. I have heard it's not easy. Like, even if I had an idea or even if I had a script, I've heard it's not easy it will take years before it even, reaches the doorstep of a studio or something. So I don't know.
But you covered sports and sports personalities.
Yeah.
If there is a film to be made on a sports, 2-3 sports personalities, who would that be?
Yeah.
If you are a consultant, somebody wanted to consult you, want to make a sports film.
I always used to find Manoj Prabhakar a very interesting character.
Lovely. Yeah.
Again, those slightly grey.
Yes.
Very Delhi in a way. Good at his craft. Excellent swing bowler. Huh?
Yes.
And but at the same time, a little of a street fighter in him. I always thought that would be a fascinating story. Then
casting is an important part. Who would you cast? Any actor comes to your mind?
For some reason, no. I can't think of anyone. Arvind Swamy came to my mind for some reason.
Yeah, pretty interesting.
But Arvind Swamy probably a little too sophisticated. But if he has that 80s mullet and that middle parting.
Yeah, but that's fascinating because I found him a very fascinating character and a very gritty cricketer, right?
Yeah, he used to, if you needed him to bat and just hold one end, he would do it. I think when Sachin scored his first...
What will Kapil say when you... And do the Kapil impersonation?
Not so good at it. I'm not...
Tell us. Come on. No, Akshay.
He might say something like, no, I don't think that is good topic for movie. Manoj Prabhakar, I don't think so. Jaan laga ke khelo, bas picture mat banao.
Okay. Any other film? Any other personality, sports personality? Leander Pace, probably.
Very complex character.
So will make a great film, right?
Yeah. And he himself has acted. Have you seen Rajdhani Express?
Was he there in that with Ajay Jadeja and Vinod? No. This is a completely separate film.
There was a movie called Rajdhani Express.
No.
So, and he also fancies himself as an actor.
No.
He does. So,
no, but Akshay, we have to do a good job of this. We can't have Leander play Leander.
Who can play Leander? You're asking me who can play Leander?
No, maybe casting may take its own time. I'm putting you on the spot.
But
a film,
subject,
he'll
fascinating
because
let's face it, with all his flaws, what he has accomplished is incredible.
And the backdrop of Indian tennis, which is a good history, right?
Yeah,
it's a good story.
And his own family backdrop.
Yes.
And all that can make for an interesting story.
Any sporting moment that you feel, not only Indian, but probably international sporting moment that you feel can make a good film or a good...
Too many to name. there are some, I feel there's some underappreciated sporting achievements by
Yes.
India,
Yeah.
you know, such as that Davis Cup tie against France in Fréjus in 1993, you know. We won on clay against a very strong French team, which is a huge upset. It's almost like India winning the 1983 World Cup. Then India's performance in the Thomas Cup, you know, a few
Oh
years
yeah,
ago.
2022.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. That's super. So I was asking Abhijit also. I think Gopi Chand is also
Gopi Chand.
a very fascinating character because he's not
Very fascinating.
he's not like Prakash. You know, he's not that soft person. He's complex.
Yeah.
He's a complex personality.
I mean, I don't
complex
know him so
personality.
well,
Yeah.
but
No,
again-
I gathered that from Abhijit's
Yeah.
book also. You
Yeah,
know, so you know.
But again, amazing dedication from Gopi Chand, and you know, because he's still he's there at the crack of dawn at his academy. At the beginning of the academy, they would, I think, his wife would make the food for the trainees, and you know, all that. So, dedication wise, it's incredible what he's done. And there's been a movie on him, on Gopi Chand. Sorry,
It's on Saina.
It's on Saina, and
But a
you're
nice
right.
actor. Manav Kaul played him.
Yeah.
Manav
Yeah,
Kaul played him, which is good.
Yeah.
In fact, Abhijit was saying that there's he was helping him. There was somebody, and there was a Telugu actor who had also played a little bit of badminton. But because, you know, so Abhijit was very critical about these Bollywood kinds who would basically find a saleable actor first and then cast, right? Rather than the other way around. So that's the problem. But, you know, just the Manoj Prabhakar story, because we from the 90s, I think he was one of the most fascinating characters, right? Manoj Prabhakar.
Yeah, and amazing guts to actually name an icon, you know, in public, and say that, okay, this is happening. And so I found it all fascinating character. Yeah.
So thank you, Akshay. I hope you know. I know you don't cover sport day to day.
Yeah.
But you can take a man out of sport, but not sport out of a man. I hope whenever you feel like talking about sport, and I know you have a great definitive voice on sport, I hope you come to the Inner Athlete Studio and come and do a couple of more episodes with us on this.
Thank you. Thanks, Samir. And thank you for inviting me on your show.
Thanks so much. Pleasure.
Yeah.
Cheers. Thank you.